G'day legends, in this video we're going to be talking about Dana White and his big old lying mouth again. He's lied about how much money Francis Ngannou would have actually made if he'd stayed with the UFC. That is what we're going to be getting into today, plus poking fun at the fat thumb man. It's so funny when you're part of this MMA YouTube community, you know, this very active community that talks about this sport that we love, especially during the live streams. People come at you when we're having these live debates with certain talking points of, but Dana said this, but Dana said that. Ladies and gentlemen, who am I playing at here? Gentlemen, you know, degenerate men of the MMA community, Dana White is quite literally paid to lie to you. His job is to stir up promotion for the UFC, its roster, and power slap. By any means necessary. That is his purpose. That is what makes up the majority of his money. It's like a politician's job. You cannot do his job and tell the truth at the same time. Recently, Dana White did 2 interviews. One of them was with the absolute new GOAT of MMA interviews. Dana White did Kevin Aioli. Let's all make sure to go over to Kevin Aioli's page. Give him plenty of love. Kevin needs to be making more donations than the MMA guru does right now because he keeps asking Dana White the questions that we all want to know. He's like, this guy is going to be unemployed soon, all right? Kevin Aioli might be the only journalist in all of MMA to actually go out of the game with his penis firmly in his hand. Kevin Aioli has said, screw it. I'm 70 years old. If I'm going to retire from journalism, I'm going out in a blaze of glory. Let's get Dana White on every single week and ask him the questions that MMA fans actually want to hear. And have you noticed that much like a good pack of NPCs, once Kevin Aioli led the charge and started asking real questions, the rest of the MMA media actually started to realize that they were born as men and started asking Dana White some questions as well. So recently you've had this pushback on Dana White with this Jon Jones being the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. That has had this pushback. And now there's these fellow questions that were brought up at Dana White's Contender Series post-fight press conference, where they continued to ask about Francis Ngannou and how Dana is claiming that he would have made more money if he stayed with the UFC. Let us watch that clip together now.
Earlier today, you did an interview with Kevin, and you mentioned that it wasn't necessarily true Francis would have made more money boxing than he would have if he stayed in the UFC.
Right.
My question to you is, you always said, he didn't want to stick around because he didn't want to fight Jon Jones. Why didn't you mention the fact that he would have made more money to fight Jon then? It would have sort of backed up your point. Why did it take you until now to bring it up?
Because why? I don't give a What's the difference?
I'm just saying, it's interesting for people to realize.
Because I know all the you people don't know. And I don't care what everybody says. It doesn't matter to me. But that's a fact. He was offered more money. Because I know the real numbers. I know the real numbers.
So there you go. I love it when Dana White says these things with so much confidence. It's so fun to see. And we're going to dissect this little clip in a second. But just check out some of his best bangers ever.
This thing absolutely dominates. We have more followers than every single professional sport. Every professional sports team, we have more followers than them. In 15 months.
Wow. More than like Real Madrid or like these soccer teams?
I don't know about the soccer teams, but I would say yes. Yeah.
So tonight, we launched our video game, mobile app video game. We're #1 in all of sports. We're #4 in all of video games. Video games, we're #1 in all of sports. We launched it today. We're #4 in all of video games. We're beating like FIFA and Call of Duty and games like that.
3 days later.
So this is yet another classic Dana Whiteism, where he's saying it's not necessarily true that Francis has made more money boxing than if he had just stayed with the UFC. So let's just break this down a little bit, okay? Because of course we have reports from Francis Ngannou himself, which is a pretty, straight up source, that he was offered a $8 million deal with the UFC. Apparently, they offered Jon Jones a very similar deal. However, what we know from the Jon Jones deal is that that came with a lock-in contract to the UFC only. And as we know, Francis wanted an opportunity to go and do some boxing. And in that multi-fight deal, I believe the one that Jon Jones signed, it's a 7-year contract attached to his deal. So essentially, it's just a little bit over $1 million per fight, Or, you know, when you add on a pay-per-view points, it's just a little bit over $1 million a fight plus pay-per-view points. So let's be very, very clear on this first point alone that completely blows everything Dana White says out of the water just by using the power of logic when you stop and think about it for one moment. Dana is saying it's not necessarily true that Francis is better off than if he went and boxed. Dana offered him an $8 million contract, UFC exclusive. All Francis wanted to do was to be able to go and box as well. Therefore, the deal that Francis was looking for would have 100% been better than the deal that he got now. It would have been the UFC plus boxing. There is no way the UFC could pay more for an exclusive deal than if it was UFC plus boxing. And that is the exact deal that he got with the PFL. It proves that it could have been done. Francis is now fighting for the PFL this year in a couple of months or a couple of weeks. Who cares? It's the PFL. It's horrible. You could give them $500 billion of Saudi oil money for free, and they still couldn't make that competition interesting. Not only did Francis get the exact deal that he was looking for at a rival and an MMA company, but just by default of that deal, it's better than what the UFC was offering him. It's MMA plus boxing. And then, of course, there's the fact that we do actually know the numbers, Dana. We know that he was getting $10 million for the Fury fight, plus pay-per-view points. And we know that he got $20 million for the Anthony Joshua fight, plus pay-per-view points. And there is no way on God's green, beautiful, flat earth that you offered him $30 million for 2 fights. And those 2 fights were standalone fights with no lock-in contract. There is no goddamn way you offered him $30 million on an independent, no lock-in contract deal. There's zero chance of that, Dana. The other thing that comes up really quickly, but he just slides it in there as well, is that Francis didn't want to fight Jon Jones, which is also just a complete and utter lie. This is a narrative that has been pumped out by the UFC consistently since Francis walked away. He wasn't let go, he walked away. And it's not true, right? Jon Jones announced that he was going to be moving up to heavyweight around the time of the Cyril Gane versus Francis Ngannou fight, praying that it was going to be Cyril Gane that got the win over Francis and become the heavyweight champion. Unfortunately for Jon, Francis was able to successfully defend that. And then he went completely silent on his aspirations about moving up to heavyweight and started talking about how he needed a good, long bit of time off to bulk up properly. This was, of course, the proper bulk up that we got when Jon Jones eventually did unveil himself in the absolute beer gut machine that we saw at UFC 285. Got the win, did the job, but let's not pretend that that was 3 years of clean eating and muscle building. People also forget that Jon Jones conveniently waited to announce his retirement until the moment after Francis Ngannou left the UFC and then started big brothering him. Dana White, you are a liar. The MMA community needs to keep reminding themselves of that fact because unfortunately you're the one in the room with the biggest microphone. You did rent out the Apex to Mark Zuckerberg. Power Slap is not doing better than every single sport that's ever existed. Didn't offer Francis Ngannou $35 million for 2 separate fights on an independent contract. Stop it. We know you're full of shit. Stop it.
Stop it. Get some help.
That's it. That's all the videos for the week. I'll be live later on today. Plus, I will be going live for all of UFC 307. Biggest bloody pay-per-view of the year, mate. Can you believe how big this pay-per-view is? It's going to be massive. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you go ahead and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I try and make an MMA video every single working day of the week. Plus, I try and go live about 3 times a week. So hit that subscribe button, hang around and see what the future content is. And if you end up hating it in the future, you can always click unsubscribe. That's all good. Until then, I will see you guys in the next video. Look after yourselves. See you then.